Remove all unapproved structures by sunset, Mr. Halden, or I'll have the county take the whole property under emergency nuisance law. That's what Merrill Creighton, president of the Hollow Glen Meadows HOA board, said as she stabbed a laminated violation notice into the soft earth next to my grandfather's boundary stone. Her perfectly manicured nails didn't even flinch when the metal edge scraped against the stone's engraving. 1922 Halden line, as if it meant nothing. She didn't look at the century-old walnut tree 10 yards behind her, or the weathered swing swaying beneath its branches. She looked at me like I was something beneath her shoe. "Only one problem," I said, pulling my phone from my chest pocket and tapping the top of the screen. "That sensor you just walked past, it's geo-fenced. Everything after that pinged directly to the state surveyor's office and the agricultural trust." Her smug little smirk didn't break, not right away. I didn't need it to. That sensor had been in the dirt for 3 weeks. I was counting on this moment. If you've ever had someone threaten to erase your entire family's legacy with a clipboard and a fake smile, subscribe now. Because what happens next is what every decent neighbor should know how to do. My name's Rhett Halden. I'm a licensed federal boundary consultant, retired but certified. And this farm has been in my family since 1919. It sits on deeded land that predates every house in Hollow Glen Meadows. And that laminated notice she planted like a flag, it's worth less than the gum stuck to the back of it. I didn't start this war, but I knew exactly how it would end the moment she mailed me my first fake violation notice and tried to fine me for hosting unauthorized produce exchange events. I've got 3 decades of zoning maps stored in my own cloud node and a private chain of custody certification tool I helped pilot with the Department of Agriculture. This land isn't just mine legally, it's mine in blood. My wife Leona planted the orchard on the north slope the spring after her first chemo round, said the soil would give her something to look forward to. She passed under that same tree 4 years later. I buried her ashes near the swing, right where Merrill stood. She didn't know that. Or maybe she did. Maybe that's why she chose to plant her flag there. 6 cop cars showed up not 5 minutes later. They parked like it was a drug raid, 1 on the gravel, 4 along the road, and 1 on my actual field trail. Sirens didn't even cut off before boots hit the ground. "Emergency structure hazard and health violation," the lead deputy called out, holding up a printout Merrill probably faxed from her smug little HOA office. "Sir, you've been given multiple warnings." "Did that paper come with a court order?" I asked. Silence. One of the younger officers glanced at the walnut tree. Another looked down at the boundary stone and shifted awkwardly. "I suggest you check the parcel index attached to that complaint," I said, nodding toward his folder. "Line 14, jurisdictional oversight exemption, under the Historical Agricultural Buffer Clause, Code 62A. I'm fully exempt from HOA jurisdiction." And just like that, the deputy's radio cracked to life. Dispatch just got a call from county legal. They said to hold position, something about pending state review, triggered from a compliance timer. That was the moment I smiled. I'd embedded that timer in the soil 2 months ago, right beneath the stone, linked to a power-independent motion sensor. The moment the HOA breached the line and triggered a violation under false jurisdiction, it initiated a review protocol with both the county surveyor's office and the Agricultural Heritage Trust. They thought I was just a grumpy old man clinging to some dusty shed. What they didn't know is that I built the very system that could undo them. Where are you watching from? Because this is how you protect land that matters. This is how you defend a legacy without ever raising your voice. And this is just the beginning. 3 weeks earlier, the first notice showed up folded under a rubber band on my gate latch. No envelope, no signature, just a stamped HOA seal and bold red font across the top. Violation, unauthorized structure, agricultural shed, unpainted, unsafe, unapproved. It wasn't even my shed. That building has stood for 97 years, built by my grandfather's brother with hand-cut pine beams and sandstone footing. It held up through 4 hurricanes and 2 regional floods. I store irrigation reels in it now, but it once housed the mule that dragged limestone out of the quarry just east of the old fence line. I called the HOA's office the moment I read it, and that's when I first heard her voice, Merrill Creighton. "We're transitioning the community toward a unified standard," she said, each syllable clipped and sugary. "Your structure is non-conforming, and presents a visual and safety risk under updated Article 12.3. It has to come down. That structure predates your articles by about a century. Yes, but your eastern field now falls within Hollow Glen Meadows, as per our 2020 expansion ballot and recorded plat update. I'd heard about that vote. Barely 50 people showed up, most from the new subdivisions. Merrill had started canvassing the area a year prior, talking about beautifying the corridor and shared values. She offered subsidized fence updates and lawn care discounts, got folks to sign soft surveys. Then somehow, the land that wasn't supposed to be part of anything suddenly became someone's project. I went down to the planning office the next morning. The maps were changed. My road, the one I paved myself with repurposed aggregate and crushed shell, was now listed as a shared easement utility access trail. That single phrase gave them leverage to issue citations and pretend they had jurisdiction over parts of my land. But I never signed anything, never approved annexation, and my deed, filed under agricultural continuance, hadn't changed since 1927. I filed a dispute. It should have frozen enforcement. It didn't. The next violation came 3 days later, this time taped to the side of my well pump cover. Unauthorized gatherings, farm stand sales in violation of HOA commerce bylaws. They called my Saturday produce table a commercial operation. Said the weathered sign, "Take what you need, leave what you can," wasn't clearly visible and posed liability risk. And the worst part? People stopped coming, not because they believed the HOA, but because they were scared. Merrill had started sending reminder notices to neighbors who parked near my field. One woman cried when she handed me a warning slip she got just for taking a bag of tomatoes. It wasn't just me under fire. The entire edge of the neighborhood, the last stretch of unregulated land, was being targeted. Merrill wanted uniformity. And she'd decided my family's land was incompatible with her idea of community harmony. The tipping point came when they sent a landscaping contractor, without notice, without approval, onto my outer field to survey for community trail integration. I confronted the guy while he was poking a soil probe into the wildflower patch near the irrigation line. He just shrugged and pointed to a clipboard. HOA permit, says this area is due for trail extension. I escorted him off the property and took a photo of the clipboard. It had a stamped signature from the HOA Development Subcommittee, but no county mark, no municipal authorization. That's when I knew. They weren't just twisting the rules, they were faking them. I dug out my original parcel plat. The boundary stone wasn't just symbolic, it was the surveyed cornerstone of the Halden estate. It had been registered by my great-grandfather and reinforced by a second certification in 1972, when the county digitized land records. The HOA maps had simply omitted it. I ran a full comparative overlay against their new digital plat and found 4 inconsistencies, intentional ones. Shrink a field here, adjust a line there, and suddenly they had leverage over 22 acres that had never been theirs. And still, they acted like I was the problem. At the next HOA meeting, they skipped my question during open floor, refused to let me speak. One of the board members said my property was a danger to neighborhood aesthetics and lowering resale values. I didn't yell, I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at Donald Virek, Merrill's building inspector, seated 2 chairs away, and watched his eyes drop to the table. He knew. He'd always known, but he didn't speak. The first time I saw Donald Virek hesitate, it wasn't in a meeting or during a phone call. It was on my property, 5 feet from the irrigation junction. Box clipboard shaking just enough to betray the war going on in his head. He was there to conduct an informal inspection, Merrill's words, for suspected code infractions relating to standing water runoff. Never mind that the field had been dry for weeks. Never mind that I held a long-standing exemption under the County Agricultural Buffer Ordinance. Just checking boxes, he mumbled, eyes low, pretending to read off the HOA form stapled to his clipboard. Nothing formal. Won't take long. I said nothing, just stood there with my arms folded, watching him circle the pump housing like it might explode. He didn't even take measurements, didn't test the soil. His fingers kept tapping the back of the clipboard like he was trying to decide whether to speak or bolt. That's when I noticed it. The paper clipped underneath wasn't a runoff checklist. It was a development permit application. Hollow Glen Meadows had already filed for trail expansion across my property, Donald had signed as the verifying inspector. He saw me looking and turned slightly as if to shield the paper with his body. "You want water?" I said flatly. "Come back when it rains. Otherwise, stop pretending this is about drainage." He opened his mouth like he might argue, then shut it again and nodded. "I'll file a no-issue report," he said. "No standing water, no visible hazards." And then he left, fast, like a man who didn't want to be asked more than he was ready to answer. Donald had always been a quiet figure on the board, sat back during meetings, rarely voted first, always deferred to Merrill when the room got tense. People saw him as passive, maybe even spineless. But I remembered when he used to run the county's inspection office back before his early retirement. He'd done things by the book back then. His signature used to mean something. So I watched him now. Not the HOA's moves, his. The next time we crossed paths was outside a gas station 2 blocks from Hollow Glen's main gate. I was refilling a propane tank for the winter heater in my greenhouse. He pulled up for windshield fluid, caught sight of me, and looked like he'd seen something in the rear view he didn't want to remember. "Donald," I said, voice even. "You ever wonder what happens when the wrong map makes its way into the right office?" He froze mid-pump, didn't turn, just nodded once, almost too small to see. I walked away. The third time was at the HOA's emergency board session. Merrill had called it under the guise of reviewing persistent non-compliance cases. I was at the bottom of the agenda. Item 7, continued refusal to comply with aesthetic and structural ordinances. They didn't even try to disguise what it was. Halfway through the meeting, as Merrill waxed on about neighborhood harmony and the vision of a forward-looking community, I saw Donald slide something under his stack of notes, a sealed envelope, yellow tabbed. He didn't hand it to anyone, just kept it tucked there, untouched, like a coiled snake in plain sight. He didn't speak when Merrill declared she'd be issuing a third and final notice to my property. He didn't flinch when she referred to the orchard as a fire hazard due to unmanaged vegetation. But he also didn't vote. When roll call passed around, he paused a second too long, then said, "Abstain." Merrill glanced sideways at him, like he'd betrayed her on live television. But she moved on. The envelope stayed sealed. That night, I found a folded note under the stone step leading up to my greenhouse. No envelope. Just one sentence in clean, inspector-type handwriting. "The maps don't match." No signature, but it didn't need one. I walked straight to my filing cabinet and pulled the overlays I'd printed last month. 2 sets of plat maps, county approved and HOA submitted. The eastern field, orchard buffer, and irrigation path, all shifted by just enough to claim jurisdiction. 4 discrepancies, enough to call it fraud. Donald had seen them, and now he'd finally chosen a side. Not out loud, not yet. But the cracks had started to show. They came at dawn, not with sirens, not with flashing lights, just a fleet of silver trucks marked with a county seal and a clipboard army. 6 vehicles in total, including one marked with Emergency Compliance Division. Merrill wasn't with them, but I spotted her SUV idling 2 houses down, parked beneath a tree like it belonged there. I didn't have to guess what this was. The notices had stopped. That meant they thought they didn't need paper anymore. 3 men stepped out first, steel-toed boots crunching across my gravel like they owned it. The tallest had a badge on his vest, but it wasn't law enforcement. It was a compliance badge, tied to some obscure subdivision of the county code office. His partner held a document roll like a weapon. "Are you Mr. Halden?" the lead one asked, voice flat. "I am." "We're here under an emergency enforcement clause submitted by the Hollow Glen Meadows Civic Board. There's been a signed declaration of imminent hazard related to unpermitted structures on this parcel, specifically a compromised barn, leaking fuel storage, and electrical safety risk. You were issued 3 citations. You failed to comply." I looked over their shoulders toward the barn. It hadn't changed in years, weathered, yes, but stable. The fuel they were referring to was a sealed diesel drum chained to a concrete slab, padlocked, never moved without transport harness. There's no leak. There's no hazard. According to the declaration, we're authorized to begin inspection immediately, and if conditions match the report, commence removal. "Do you have a court order?" "No, sir, but under subsection..." "Then you're trespassing." The lead officer shifted his weight. He hadn't expected resistance. They never did when HOA. Paperwork was involved. These men were used to mobile homes, illegal decks, above-ground pools, cases where homeowners rolled over when anything official came down the driveway. I didn't move, I didn't invite them in, and I sure as hell didn't offer coffee. Behind them, 2 more men had pulled measuring tools from a plastic case. They stood near the base of the walnut tree now, directly in line with the swing that still creaked gently in the morning wind. They had crossed the stone, and just like that, the first sensor triggered. Buried 6 inches beneath the boundary marker was a geotagged accelerometer wired to a solar ping relay. The moment their boots crossed, it sent a time-stamped activation signal to 3 recipients: the State Surveyor's Office, the Agricultural Heritage Trust, and the County Registrar of Land Use Oversight. I built it with a friend before he retired. He called it a jurisdictional dead man's switch. I'd been waiting weeks for someone to trip it. "You might want to check your inbox," I said calmly. The man blinked. "Excuse me?" I said check your inbox, because what you're doing, it's already being reviewed, live. His partner opened his tablet, his brows pulled together. "Hey, we just got a ping complaint notice from, what is this? Surveyor Tier 1 escalation. It says they've received a sensor alert on this parcel, and it's flagged for immediate jurisdictional review." The lead stepped back. "We weren't told this property was under any active review." "It is, because I filed one 3 weeks ago. And that sensor you just walked over was listed as certified evidence-gathering equipment. You've officially triggered the clock." Behind me, I heard the old bell mounted to the barn chime. Wind probably caught the rope, or maybe it was just Leona saying good morning. Either way, I didn't look back. One of the clipboard carriers stepped away and made a call. I caught fragments. Site triggered early, landmark sensor, trust involvement, and then he walked fast back to his truck. The rest hesitated. "You can finish the inspection," I said, "but if you remove a single board, you'll be interfering with a parcel currently protected under state-level agricultural review." They didn't, not that day. Instead, they packed up after 20 minutes, took a few useless photos of a building older than any of them, and left without saying much. The lead officer offered a stiff nod, but no apology. Meryl was gone when I looked back toward the tree. Her SUV had vanished, but I knew she wasn't finished. She'd escalated once, and I knew she'd do it again. The next letter wasn't left on my gate. It came certified, stamped, sealed, and delivered in a plain white envelope with the words "Final Action Notice" printed in bold across the top. No mistaking it, no pretending it was a mistake. This was the final card in Merrill Creighton's deck. Inside was a multi-page form, legal language in the tight font. A notice of emergency board vote approving forcible contractor entry within 72 hours if the property owner failed to comply with mandatory remediation orders. They planned to remove the barn, clear the field, and begin trail path stabilization across what they now labeled Public Use Corridor D. They'd rename my land like it already belonged to them. I sat with the letter at the kitchen table, the one Leona had refinished with her own hands after we retired. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, scattering across the paper like it didn't understand what it carried. I didn't feel rage, I felt precision. There was a reason I'd kept every plat, every permit, every county-level certification tucked into climate-controlled filing sleeves for the last 3 decades. Not because I'm sentimental, because I know how this works. They weren't trying to win in court. They were trying to wear me down, but they'd miscalculated. 3 hours later, I drove to the county records building. Not to search the archives, I'd already done that. No, I was there to verify something I'd found the day before when comparing overlays. The discrepancy wasn't just in the size of the parcels, it was in the surveyor's signature. On the HOA submitted plat, the new boundary expansion had been stamped and signed by a registered surveyor named Benrick L. Arlo, a real man, a licensed official. But the document date was off. It showed submission on a Friday, April 14th, 2023. Except Benrick Arlo was in surgery that day. Emergency gallbladder removal. I knew that because I called his office pretending to be a client last week. His assistant, without prompting, told me he hadn't worked for 4 days that week. He couldn't have signed the plat, which meant someone either forged the date or forged the signature. The clerk at the counter raised an eyebrow when I showed her the paper. "That's our file copy," she said. "It was submitted electronically. Looks clean. May I request the original submission logs, the actual upload record, IP signature, metadata?" She squinted. That's not standard for public access. I know, but under Agricultural Continuance Section 18A, I have audit rights over any plats affecting reclassified buffer zone parcels. I can file a formal verification request today. Her tone shifted. She stood and stepped into the back office without another word. 10 minutes later, I had a printout. Submission had come from a personal IP address, not a surveyor's account, not a licensed firm. It was an HOA board member's home network. I recognized the name, Tucker Wills, one of Merrill's yes men. He'd filed the expansion plat on a Friday using a document he didn't have legal authority to submit. And that was enough. Forgery, digital manipulation, unauthorized boundary declaration. Now I had leverage, not just to defend my land, but to file for outside. Review under State Land Use Misrepresentation Clause 7.3. That clause gives immediate jurisdiction to the Office of Surveyor General when agricultural boundaries are redrawn under falsified certification. The state could override the HOA, and Merrill wouldn't even see it coming. I returned home and pulled out the secondary hard drive I'd kept disconnected until now. It held full drone footage of the land, time-stamped scans of the barn, orchard, boundary stone, and a panoramic sweep showing undisturbed soil all the way to the neighboring cul-de-sac, shot at monthly intervals, all logged and geotagged. That footage would go with the letter. So would the submission log, the signature mismatch, the paper trail they thought I'd never find. I placed everything in a brown envelope, and on the front I wrote in thick black ink, Protected land. Encroachment investigation. Immediate review requested. I sealed it, set it on the edge of the desk, and looked out the window toward the boundary stone. 3 days left on Merrill's deadline. But my clock had already started ticking. It rained the next morning, a soft, steady drizzle that soaked into the earth without thunder or threat, just enough to turn the orchard's topsoil into velvet and fill the air with the smell of damp walnut bark. I stood under the overhang of the barn, watching water bead across the metal latch of the diesel tank Merrill's crew had claimed was leaking. It hadn't budged in years. The chain was still wrapped tight, lock uncut. No rust near the seals. Not a single violation, except the one they'd imagined. The envelope sat in the cab of my truck, sealed and addressed, waiting to be delivered to the Office of Surveyor General. I hadn't sent it yet, because I wanted Merrill to move first. Let her set the stage. Let her build her trap. The deeper she walked into it, the more impossible it would be to walk back out. But I wasn't waiting idle. That morning, I initiated the second phase of the sensor array. Not just the trigger beneath the boundary stone that had already served its purpose, but the side channel relay I'd set beneath the pump house beside the irrigation spool. Most people install motion detectors and think that's enough. But this one was built different. The moment someone crossed the second fence line, it would initiate a chain of silent alerts, one to the Agricultural Trust's Field Monitoring Department, one to the Emergency Legal Counsel at the County Registrar's Office, and one to my own off-site server. It wouldn't stop her, but it would prove intent. The final piece was time. Merrill had given me 72 hours. That was fine, because I only needed 48. By midday, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Halden, this is Pilar Nowaks from the Agricultural Heritage Trust. I'm calling regarding a land boundary escalation protocol we just received. I smiled faintly. Glad it reached you. It did. In fact, your name came up from our 2019 Preservation Program application list. I believe your orchard was flagged as pending historic designation? That's correct. I pulled my application when my wife passed. Didn't see the point back then. Well, you're back in review now. The evidence you submitted is being evaluated under Priority Tier 2. Our compliance review officer will be in touch. And the sensor triggers? We've confirmed authenticity, and we're preparing a statement for the Surveyor General's office. If your boundaries have been falsified and they intersect a protected designation zone, then the HOA's authority claim is null. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. After we hung up, I walked back to the swing. The rope was slick with rain, the old wood seat damp but intact. It was the same swing Leona sat on during our last spring together. She used to bring her tea here in the mornings, wrapped in a quilt. Even when her joints ached too much to garden, she died in the house, but she lived here, right under this tree. I wasn't just fighting for a property line. I was fighting for her name not to be bulldozed into mulch because someone wanted to lay a jogging path where her ashes rested. I ran my fingers along the edge of the boundary stone. The carved date had begun to soften after a century of storms, but the grooves still held. My grandfather's hand had chipped them in with a steel chisel. His brother held the lantern while he worked. People talk about legacy like it's a story. But out here, legacy is measured in soil and roots and what you refuse to let them take. That night, I didn't sleep much. I printed 3 more map overlays, highlighted the discrepancies in bold red, labeled every false claim on the HOA's submission, line by line. I used a fresh folder, labeled it Exhibit B, and clipped Donald's handwritten note to the inside cover. Then I wrote my final letter. To the county sheriff's office. Subject: Preemptive declaration of false jurisdictional enforcement. I laid out the plat forgery, the false violations, the unauthorized trespass, and the timeline of evidence. I didn't ask for intervention. I documented my position for when they came again, because they would. And when they did, I'd be ready. I found Donald sitting alone at the far edge of the farmer's market pavilion the next morning, a cup of stale coffee trembling slightly in his hand. He wasn't browsing, wasn't talking, just staring at the freshly painted Hollow Glen seasonal stall banner fluttering above the community tent like it belonged there. He didn't flinch when I approached. "Looks like Meryl got her new signage," I said. His jaw flexed. "She pushed it through without a vote." "Sounds familiar." He nodded once, eyes never leaving the crowd. "They're moving fast now, talking about redirecting funds to develop trail access by spring. Said your eastern field's already listed as pending transformation." "Even though it's not theirs?" He finally looked at me. "She thinks it will be soon." I pulled a folded page from my jacket and slid it onto the table in front of him. A high-resolution printout of the submission log, complete with Tucker Will's name, IP address, and timestamp. Donald's eyes scanned it. I saw his throat tighten. "She forged a boundary shift," I said. "Filed it through one of her people on a day the surveyor was in surgery." "I told her it wasn't finished," he whispered. "I told her we didn't have the final certification. She said no one would check." I let the silence settle between us. "You kept the original overlay in your file cabinet," I said. "Didn't you?" He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. "I can fight this," I continued. "But it's not enough for the paper trail to exist. They'll try to claim clerical error. Merrill will blame Tucker, maybe even you, but if that signature was flagged from inside the board..." He looked away again. "I've got grandkids in this neighborhood, Rhett. I'm not asking you to burn the house down, Donald. I'm asking you to open a window before someone chokes." He picked up the paper and folded it carefully. His hands were still shaking, but slower now, more deliberate. "If I give you what you're asking, what happens next?" I hand it to the Surveyor General's office, alongside the Heritage Trust. They initiate a jurisdictional override. Every map submitted by the HOA in the last 18 months goes under review, and Hollow Glen's expansion plan dies on the table. And the barn, it stays. So does the orchard, and the tree, and every inch of soil under it. He held the folded page in both hands like it weighed more than it should. His voice was soft when he finally spoke. "I remember when Leona planted that orchard." I said nothing. "I inspected your boundary line myself when you built that swing ramp for her. You filed every paper, every measurement matched. You did it by the book." "So did she," I said quietly. Donald stood without another word, walked to his truck, reached into the glove box and pulled out a flat blue folder. When he returned, he slid it across the table. Inside was the original county-certified boundary overlay, dated and notarized. No HOA markings, no redrawn easements, just clean lines. "I never submitted it," he said. "I was told to wait, to let the HOA map take precedence for now. Temporary jurisdiction," she called it. "You kept it this whole time?" He nodded. "You know what this means?" He looked exhausted. "It means I was wrong for staying quiet." "No," I said. "It means now we're not fighting alone." I took the folder and walked back to my truck, rain clouds already stirring overhead. I stored it with the rest of the evidence. Next to the drone footage, the soil logs and the printed sensor timestamps. This wasn't just paper anymore. This was testimony. And for the first time, I had more than sensors and history on my side. I had a voice from inside the machine, a voice that remembered what the lines used to mean. I cleared off the kitchen table and laid everything out in rows. Evidence on the left, timing on the right, the folder from Donald dead center. 3 stacks. Stack 1 held the overlays. County certified maps, the kind with embossed seals, dated and initialed. They showed what my grandfather's hands had laid out and what my wife had fought to preserve. The orchard, the swing, the pump shed, all well within the protected parcel. I circled each surveyed corner with red marker, double labeling each discrepancy the HOA maps ignored. Stack 2 was digital, timestamps from the motion sensors, drone sweeps captured at 10-day intervals, footage of the contractor stepping into the wildflower buffer without clearance, a slow pan of the fake trail markers Merrill's team had staked 3 feet past my original fence line. Every clip was geotagged. I'd layered them into a secure drive linked to a flash key, which I now taped into the folder's sleeve. Stack 3 was the nuclear option. The log from the county registrar's server showing Tucker Will's IP address submitting the plat revision under the name of a surveyor who hadn't been on the job that day. With it, a notarized letter from Pilar Noaques at the Agricultural Heritage Trust, confirming their review of my drone footage and sensor trigger evidence. Together, it was enough. Enough to initiate jurisdictional override. Enough to bypass HOA internal resolutions. Enough to put the matter in the hands of the Office of Surveyor General and bury Merrill's false map campaign before a single shovel hit my land. But paper alone doesn't stop momentum. People do. That's where Donald came in. His folder, blue, plain, marked only with the initials DV, held the original overlay he'd never filed, the one Merrill told him to delay, the one that proved their board had intentionally submitted a conflicting map to edge me into a non-compliant zone. I opened the folder again and reread his attached note, freshly signed and dated. I, Donald Virek, served as the certifying inspector during the original 2020 map expansion review for Hollow Glen Meadows HOA. At no time did I authorize the submission of adjusted boundaries affecting Parcel 14A, Halden property. I retained the original file pending final review, and was later instructed to defer to alternate documents, which I now believe to be misrepresented. Signed, witnessed, legal, it was the missing piece. And I was ready to deliver it. I called Pilar first. "I've added a board witness statement," I told her. She sounded almost surprised. "He came forward?" "He did." "Then this isn't just a review case anymore. It's an active suppression attempt of a protected parcel. I'd like the review team to see the footage in person." She hesitated. "Are you requesting an on-site inspection?" "Yes, before the HOA acts on their timeline." "Can you be ready in 48 hours?" "I'll be ready in 4. After we hung up, I moved to the barn. Opened the side drawer beneath the workbench where I kept the original swing schematic Leona had drawn during her first remission. We'd built it together, her hands too weak to lift the bolts, so she just held the ropes in place while I drilled them through the beam. I packed the drawing into a second folder and labeled it Heritage File, not for legal use, for perspective. Let them see what they were trying to bulldoze. That night, I filed the official override packet with the Office of Surveyor General through their emergency escalation channel. It required 2 verified pieces of physical evidence, 3 digital, and a professional witness willing to certify under penalty of perjury. I submitted 5 pieces of evidence, and Donald's affidavit. By the time the screen blinked upload complete, I had committed every ounce of leverage I had. No turning back. Not now. The next 48 hours wouldn't be about waiting. They'd be about holding the line, holding it like my grandfather had, holding it for Leona, and holding it with everything I had left. Rain returned the next morning, harder this time, drumming across the barn roof like footsteps in retreat. But I wasn't retreating, I was preparing. The drone came out first, old but reliable, a model I'd customized myself during my consulting years. I swapped the battery, ran a calibration pass over the orchard, and launched it from the back field with a clean trajectory sweep. The camera buzzed steadily as it passed over the boundary stone, then the pump shed, then the swing under the walnut tree. I watched the feed from my laptop as the footage stitched together in real time, clean, straight lines, and no evidence of the so-called hazards Merrill's board had claimed. No erosion, no fuel spills, no electrical dangers. Just land, quiet, and alive. The footage went into Folder C, Visual Exhibits. I added timestamps, location pings, and cross-checked the soil moisture reading with last month's climate data. After that, I moved to the sensor box near the pump line. The second trigger hadn't been used yet. Not the one buried beneath the wildflower buffer. That one was passive. But the secondary node, the one that sent a signal burst if tampered with, needed to be armed. I opened the casing, clicked the toggle beneath the internal battery, and watched as the LED blinked once. Armed. From now on, if anyone stepped into the field without keyed authorization, the signal would ping straight to Pilar's inbox with GPS and time code. The land was no longer just mine to defend. It was under official review now, and I intended to protect that status. Inside the house, I checked my drive folder. Pilar had already added a few notations to the shared evidence vault. A state-level reviewer had been assigned, Inspector Camille Thursby, a name I recognized from my years in certification. She didn't miss things. There was also a scheduled on-site inspection logged for the following morning, 7 a.m. sharp, with 3 reviewers. No HOA members notified. Perfect. I wanted them to show up uninvited. I wanted them to trespass in real time. The trap wasn't just baited. It was marked, mapped, and blinking red. That evening, I printed laminated signs to mount along the eastern perimeter. Each one bore the following warning: Notice: Protected Agricultural Heritage Parcel. Under active review, entry prohibited by county statute. 7.3A sensor monitoring. In effect, let them pretend they didn't know. I hammered the first one into the soil just behind the boundary stone, the second at the edge of the wildflower field, and the third by the barn ramp where the swing's rope cast its shadow over the grass. I wasn't just protecting dirt, I was protecting a century. Just before sunset, I took the final step. I uploaded all footage, evidence folders, Donald's affidavit, and even the swing schematic into a private portal linked to a local reporter I trusted. Mara Clements, a freelance journalist who covered land rights cases in the Tri-County area. I didn't send her a message, I just gave her access. If the board pushed, if anything went sideways tomorrow, the truth would already be moving before they could stop it. By nightfall, I had nothing left to add, nothing left to tweak or improve. The land was prepped, the files were synced, the sensors were armed, the affidavit was certified. Now it was just a matter of who crossed the line first. Because this time, every step they took came with a consequence. Every inch past that stone would cost them more than they knew, and I wouldn't have to lift a finger. They came at 6:42 a.m., not the inspection team. Merrill. I'd just finished tightening the last bolt on the orchard fence when I heard tires crunch up the trail behind the boundary stone. No warning, no email, no call. Just a white utility van pulling onto land she didn't own, with 2 men in hard hats, stepping out like they were clocking in for a demolition job. Merrill stepped out a moment later, heels stabbing into the wet grass. She wore a bright crimson raincoat like she wanted to be seen. No clipboard this time, just a folded document in her hand and a forced smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "This is your last chance, Mr. Halden," she called. I didn't answer. Per board vote and enforcement clause, removal begins today. If you interfere, we'll cite you for obstruction. The 2 men were already heading toward the barn. One had a crowbar, the other a drill strap to his side. Neither of them looked confident. Probably day laborers. Probably hadn't been told what they were walking into. I walked down the slope toward them, slow, deliberate. "You're trespassing," I said. "We have permission," the taller one mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "From who?" He motioned vaguely behind him. "Her." I stepped forward just enough for the motion sensor buried beneath the tree line to activate. I didn't have to check. It had blinked once when I left the porch. That meant Pilar's inbox just got a live GPS confirmation. Behind me, the low hum of tires on gravel signaled a second arrival. 3 black sedans pulled onto the trail, one after the other. Doors opened in unison. First came Pilar, clipboard tucked under her arm, boots caked with field mud. Next, Camille Thursby from the Office of Surveyor General. And last, a man I didn't recognize but knew instantly from his state-issued windbreaker, legal liaison from county land use. Merrill's face paled. "Ms. Creighton," Pilar said, stepping forward. "I wasn't aware this property was under scheduled action this morning." Merrill straightened. It's under board-approved compliance enforcement. The timeline was declared. We have already filed with the county. Camille raised an eyebrow. And yet, this parcel is currently frozen under Tier 2 protection pending fraud review. No alterations or access changes are authorized until investigation completion. You can't override a local enforcement action, Merrill snapped. The legal liaison stepped beside Camille. You're right. Normally we wouldn't. He pulled a folder from his bag, flipping it open. But we have reason to believe your board filed false documentation to obtain enforcement jurisdiction, including a forged signature from a state-licensed surveyor. He looked at the hard hat workers. You gentlemen may want to step back now. Anything you damage on protected land could open you to liability. They didn't wait to be told twice. Both turned around and headed back to the van without a word. One actually jogged. Merrill didn't move. This is a mistake, she said, but the volume was gone. Camille handed her a copy of Donald's affidavit. This is your inspector's signature. His original overlay proves your submitted plat was altered without certification. That puts every citation issued since April under scrutiny. That includes this one. Pilar turned toward me. Mr. Halden, the Agricultural Heritage Trust and State Surveyor's Office formally recognized your land as historically significant. As of now, your parcel is locked under oversight, protection pending boundary re-verification. No further action will be taken by the HOA. I nodded once. Merrill didn't speak, didn't move. She just stood there in her red coat, still gripping the paper she came to deliver like it meant something now. It didn't. The storm broke over us then. Real thunder, no warning. The sky cracked wide open, dumping sheets of rain onto the barn roof. The orchard, the swing swaying gently in the wind. And still, no one moved to stop it. The lines had been drawn, and this time, they held. The boardroom smelled like fresh paint and desperation. 2 weeks had passed since the inspection team shut down Merrill's morning ambush on my land, but the HOA insisted on holding a community clarification session to, as the email read, restore transparency and trust. They set it in Hollow Glen's event hall, complete with folding chairs, soft lighting, and a posterboard easel with their vision for the trail expansion propped near the entrance like none of this had ever happened. Merrill sat at the center of the table, lips drawn tight, flanked by 4 remaining board members. Tucker Wills was there too, looking significantly less smug now that his name had been flagged in a digital submission investigation. He didn't look at me as I walked in. The room filled slowly. Not packed, but enough for a presence. Neighbors who'd been silent now glanced at me differently, not with pity, with interest. I didn't sit. Pilar stood just behind me, her badge clipped to her jacket. Camille Thursby hadn't come, but she'd sent a formal statement to be read aloud. And Donald, he stood by the side wall, arms crossed, folder in hand. Merrill cleared her throat and leaned toward the mic. Before we begin, she said, I'd like to state that the board never intended harm to any homeowner. We acted based on documentation provided at the time. Any discrepancies found were not reflective of the board's overall intentions. Pilar stepped forward. With all due respect, Ms. Creighton, the discrepancies in question include falsified documents, unauthorized boundary extensions, and an attempted land seizure during an active protection review. Let's be clear what we're discussing. A murmur swept the room. Merrill's smile didn't return. I'm here today representing the Agricultural Heritage Trust, Pilar continued, in coordination with the Office of Surveyor General. After thorough review, it has been determined that Parcel 14A, owned by Mr. Rhett Halden, was never under lawful HOA jurisdiction and was submitted for board action under fraudulent pretenses. Gasps now, not loud, but real. She turned to me. Mr. Halden, would you like to speak? I stepped forward slowly, not to the podium, but to the center of the room. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I said, but I'm also not going to let my family's name be scrubbed from the soil because someone wanted a walking path. I turned toward the board. You didn't just cross lines on a map. You crossed into my history. You forged a signature, trespassed on protected land, and threatened to demolish a barn that stood before any of your houses were even framed. I looked at the neighbors then. My wife planted our orchard during chemo. My grandfather placed the boundary stone with his brother by lantern light. I've buried family under that tree. That land holds more than fruit and fences. It holds memory. and memory deserves protection. Donald stepped forward next. No preamble, no hesitation. My name is Donald Virek. I served as a board member and inspector. I was told to delay an official overlay in favor of a plat that didn't match our reviewed maps. I remained quiet for too long. That's on me. He looked at the board. But what Merrill submitted wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, and I won't stay silent about that. Then he laid the original overlay on the table and stepped back. The silence stretched. Tucker tried to speak, but Merrill cut him off with a raised hand. Her voice, when it came, was low and strained. I moved to suspend all further board actions relating to Parcel 14A and recommend full withdrawal of any expansion claims tied to the current Hollow Glen Trail proposal. One by one, the other members nodded. Except Tucker, he didn't move at all. Donald stepped forward once more. I also moved that the board hold an emergency election to fill vacated seats and review all HOA citations issued in the past year. The room, quiet moments ago, erupted with quiet approval, murmurs of "about time" and "yes" from the folding chairs. Merrill stood slowly, gathered her papers, and walked out without a word. The lines she'd redrawn had finally redrawn her. The day the county released the final ruling, the air over Hollow Glen felt different, cleaner somehow. No more warnings tucked under my gate, no more survey trucks idling by the field. Just the sound of wind brushing through the walnut branches, creaking against the old swing rope Leona had once braided herself. The notice came by certified mail, just like hers had. Only this one didn't threaten, it confirmed. The Office of Surveyor General had voided every expansion claim filed under Hollow Glen Meadows for the past 2 years. The Agricultural Heritage Trust had placed my parcel under permanent protective designation. The HOA could never again assert authority over it. It was done. Quietly, cleanly, and legally done. I took the letter outside and read it beneath the tree. Rain hadn't fallen in days, but the soil still smelled alive. A streak of sunlight cut through the branches, scattering gold against the boundary stone, where my grandfather's initials still carved through the weather like defiance itself. The swing moved faintly. I almost thought I heard her laugh in it, the soft one she used to give when she caught me pretending not to be tired. I reached out and steadied the rope. Leona would have hated the noise this whole mess created. The meetings, the letters, the shouting. She always believed decency was quieter than victory, but she'd have been proud that I didn't let them take it, that I fought with the same patience she used to plant her seeds. By noon, Donald stopped by. He didn't come with a clipboard or folder this time, just a weathered envelope and 2 cups of coffee from the diner. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie missing, and there was color in his face again, like a man who'd finally exhaled. "They accepted my resignation," he said, handing me the coffee. "Didn't feel right staying on after everything?" "Maybe you should," I said. "They'll need someone who knows what honesty looks like." He smiled a little. "Maybe later. For now, I'm just glad it's over." He looked toward the barn. "You ever gonna repaint that thing?" "No," I said. "It earned every scar." We stood there for a minute in easy silence, the same kind that only happens when 2 men have already said everything that mattered. Before he left, Donald set the envelope on my porch railing. "I kept something from the last meeting," he said. "Thought you should have it." Inside were the old HOA photos, drone shots, planning boards, budget sheets, all stamped void. On top was a handwritten note. "For the archive. The truth always deserves paper." When he drove off, I carried the envelope to the barn. It joined the rest of the files, stored safely in the drawer beside the Heritage Trust certificate. Later that evening, I heard children laughing across the road. Families from the neighborhood had started coming back to the orchard again. Some brought baskets, others just walked the trail that never cut through my land after all. No one asked permission, but everyone waved. It wasn't defiance anymore. It was understanding. I hung a small plaque by the gate, just above the latch where the first violation notice had once been clipped. It read, "The Halden Orchard Est. 1919 Protected Land and Community Gift. In memory of Leona Halden, whose roots ran deeper than any fence." The sun dropped low, painting the field in amber light. I rang the barn bell once, for her, then once for my grandfather, and once more for the peace that finally settled between all of it. When the echo faded, I sat on the swing and looked toward the horizon where the cul-de-sac lights began to glow. The same neighbors who once stayed quiet were out there now, their porches lit again, their windows open. They'd seen what happened. They'd seen what truth could do when you don't back down. Maybe the world doesn't end when people draw false lines. Maybe it just waits for someone to erase them. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. It stands still, steady as stone, until the noise collapses on itself. If you've ever watched someone try to steal what generations built, remember this. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means waiting for the right moment to speak, and when you do, making sure the whole world hears it. Subscribe for more true justice stories like this. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?